We're trashing our planet. We're consuming and exhuming finite resources at a remorseless rate. We're looting and polluting, and no one's disputing it's insanely unsustainable. Now, we all know that. We know that we're rubbish at rubbish, and we know what we need to do to get better at waste management. Reduce, reuse, recycle. And yet the problems continue to pile up, just as if individual cities, universities, governments all think it's someone else's job to dispose of them. Now today, rather than picking over the mess we're already made, we're concentrating on the cleanup, not only reducing, reusing and recycling, but also reimagining, repurposing and re-inspiring. Reimagining the practical steps to take, repurposing misdirected good intentions, and re-inspiring all those individuals and institutions so busy cutting through the excess packaging of the everyday, they aren't doing the little things that could and should make a big difference.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and talking to you all in Algeria. And we're talking down the line which involves a huge amount of electronics and information. I've got my laptop here. I've also got next to me my phone in case this one falls over. So I've got electronic gear in my life. You have your end, I'm assuming. And this is something I'd like to talk to you about as we move towards questions in the panel meeting. But I think that, you know, a smartphone and perhaps laptops are pretty standard fare, I think, for university students and university academics. But what I want to talk to you about today is the waste that is produced, and can we stem the tide, because it is a tsunami of electronic waste that the world is producing at the moment, and more CO2 emissions are emitted during the production of phones and laptops and TVs than is ever emitted during their use. So it's the production of them that really has a huge environmental impact in terms of CO2 emissions. But that's not the only thing. Of course, if you think about it, and maybe you have never thought about it, but let me talk you through it. A phone has more than half of the periodic table in it. So periodic table is a catalogue of all the elements that we know exist in the universe. It's roughly about 106 if you insist, and half of them are in here. Now, where do we get them from? Well, we got them from mines all around the world, including Algeria, and they've all been, you know, dug out of the ground, tons and tons of ore, loads of energy for that, and often the working conditions are not so great either in many places, particularly if you're talking about things like cobalt and gold in Africa, but also lithium in South America. So these minerals and mines are not ethically kind of perhaps, you know, completely to be exonerated, but then it all comes together. It's made into components, that's made into electronics, and then the magic happens, the assembly, and you get this piece of kit in your life which is revolutionary, there's no doubt about it, and it opens up the whole world. But the average life of a smartphone is very short. So all of that effort goes to what? It goes to essentially a whole mindset amongst electronic companies and increasingly in the world of consumption, of let's get the latest, newest one, throw this one out because the next one's going to make me feel a lot better about myself. I'm going to have more power. But in truth, what it really is doing is creating a mountain of waste, a mountain of CO2 emissions, lots of water being used that shouldn't be used, and a lot of money being held in the hands of very few billionaires. So all of this is I'm just elaborating the problem. Now, the UK is the highest emitter of electric waste in the world per person. So we don't have anything to teach anyone else in the world about this. We're the worst. And what we're doing in our project is trying to understand how we can get a repair culture back in the UK. We used to have one, and it's the easiest way to cut our CO2 emissions in terms of electric waste. But it's going to be difficult for us because of consumption. But I want to talk to you because I know in Africa, and I'm not sure about Algeria, but I'm sure it is on your campus, that you actually do already have a healthy repair culture. And we want to learn from you. So I'm all ears, actually, because this is something the West really needs to learn from Africa.
Very nice, Mark. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point that you make. Obviously, there's several points. I mean, people are going to be picking up the take-home fact is half the periodic table is in your phone, but there's a danger there that almost glamorizes. It's like, oh, I must get myself a new phone, because now it's not just a phone, it's half the periodic table as well. And you're obviously right that we've had this repair culture and we don't have this repair culture. But isn't it always hard technologically to go backwards once we know we don't need to? How do you get us to think that we need to change the value we put on repair? Because we talk about, oh, that's patched up, oh, that's secondhand, oh, that's reconditioned, that's pre-loved. How do we change it to make it seem that actually I'm prouder of having something that's been repaired than something that's brand new?
I think that is the big challenge here. I think there's both an economic driver, which is at the moment in the UK, a lot of things are cheaper to buy new than they are to get repaired. And that's because the price you have to pay for someone qualified who's knowledgeable to repair a kettle, a phone, a toaster, a laptop, the price per hour means that after a couple of hours, you might as well have bought a new one. And this is an economic driver which I think needs to be addressed in terms of pricing the waste. So the waste is not being priced into this equation. So it looks like it's only an issue of price per hour, but actually you're avoiding a certain amount of waste, and that waste has to be added to the calculation. So that's an economic issue. The other thing is, of course, cultural, which is we want the latest, greatest, newest, thingest, biggest, and that is something that is also kind of a 20th century appetite, a bit like eating lots of meat that we've kind of got used to. I don't think that is, I think we can walk back from that. I think culture and fashion, I mean, for a while ago, if I said to you, ripped jeans is cool, you'd be like, what? Ripped jeans? Cool? What are you talking about? But ripped jeans are cool, like who knew?
And there are some countries that have managed to kind of keep this going on. I remember being in New Zealand, and they have this phrase here that you may have come across called the number 8 wire mentality, which is that used to be the belief from the old days of the kind of pioneers that almost anything could be repaired with a bit of this wire and a bit of ingenuity. And they take pride in that idea to this day, that we don't need to get a new thing, we can repair what we've got. So if you can change the mental perspective around this, then you get the behavioural change, rather than this just being a kind of ideological goal that people say they mean to do, but they never get around to doing.
Yeah, I mean, on that front, I think having a phone that you can change the battery without voiding the warranty is a step number one. So I've got a phone called a Fairphone, but it's one of the few phones in the UK which is sold on the basis that it's repairable, and you can buy all the parts and they want you to repair it. And so I can take pride in having this 10 years later. Yes, Paolo's got one too.
Paolo's holding it up, great.
But you've got other companies, big ones, Samsung, Apple, which are gluing in their components, and I think that there is a role here for governments, and we have the right to repair movement in the EU and in the UK, which is basically a bit of legislation forcing companies to make things repairable. And I think there is, we're trying to protect the commons, i.e. the environment and the world. And to protect a common value and a common resources, we have to. I think governments have a big role. But I'd be interested in what people say about this in Algeria.
So basically, just a quick walkthrough on the Algerian recycling ecosystem. We Algerians, as many consumer communities, have evolved since the Industrial Revolution, following a linear economical scheme, which is that we are taking resources, manufacturing products, using products, and end up disposing of the products. Each time we go all over this line, we finish up with more waste and lesser resources, which is highly unsustainable, as you know. The latest World Wildlife Foundation report shows that 95% of the floating debris in the Mediterranean Sea is plastic, and of course it is coming from the land. So, which is not very pretty thing to brag about, if I may say so. Algeria, to tell you a few numbers about waste in Algeria, Algeria is producing around 11 million tons per domestic waste per year, while only recycling 10% of them. These 10% get recycled throughout this magical, as I like to call it, process called circular economy, which is a process that mimics nature and that makes it so that nothing is lost and everything is transformed. If we zoom in on the local recycling economy in Algeria, we find that there is the consumers which deposit unsorted waste in the common trash bin. There are a few informal collectors, which are people who come and scavenge the trash to get the recyclables and to transport them to the recycling companies. So this is the premises on which we started building realistically. We asked each one of these segments, why aren't you guys recycling more than 10%? So for the consumers, most of them didn't know the proper way to sort. And for those who knew how to sort waste, they didn't have direct access to the recycling industry. So they didn't have like this tool to contribute. We also asked the informal collectors, why aren't you guys making more than 10%? Manual sorting is time and effort consuming. And also, since they go and scavenge the common trash bin, they only get the higher parts of it. Which then led us to the recycling industry. We're like, why aren't you guys recycling more than 10% of domestic waste? Most of the answers were that they were not receiving enough input. So they are waiting there with cash in hand, waiting for the informers to come and to give them the recyclables for them to start the recycling cycle. Recycling, as most people know, is an industrial process. It has its costs and it has its downsides. So this is where we decided to create Neurocycli, a platform that links the consumers to their local recycling industry. They subscribe on a website, they get free training on waste sorting, and they get directed to the nearest collection point, to where they deposit their waste, they gain points from them, and then they can later on exchange these points for products and services provided by one of our partners. The platform is also targeting informal collectors by formalizing them, training them, equipping them with safety equipment, and giving them a map so they can go out there and get the most recyclables with lesser efforts. The recyclables are already sorted, dry, and compacted. So really depends when it comes to the Algerian recycling ecosystem. For us, it's really we put an emphasis on the optimization of the ecosystem. We believe that once we get the ecosystem optimized, once we get enough products to incentivize more users to sort their waste at home and to deposit at the local collection points, once we get more small businesses on board as collection points playing this role as a part-time job, we believe that this loop can sustain itself and play an effective role against the plastic pollution we see in Algeria. We have only developed a beta version of it. We are targeting the center region of Algeria. As you mentioned, Algeria, you can say, is a continent. So as for now, we are doing some tests in order to optimize this process throughout the middle part of Algeria. And later on, we believe in a bottom-up approach to where each time we go into a new location, we develop a small ecosystem. We make it so that the ecosystem sustains itself, and then later on, we connect the multiple ecosystems. The platform was only launched 6 months ago, and we haven't done any marketing. We wanted to really test the tool for what it is. We haven't done any important marketing or anything, and we have already more than 3,000 active users on the platform. So also we started the building the platform on the premises that Algerians don't want to recycle. So we were believing that it either takes a tax to get them to recycle or to give them goodies to make them recycle. And then later on we figured out that actually Algerians were an ancient civilization on waste sorting and recycling. And I can give you an example. Most Algerians in the live will recognize them. Basically, as you might know, the Algerian diet is has a lot of bread in it. We use a lot of bread. We often buy more than what we need, which eventually gets into an environmental problem. Well, Algerians have this approach to bread to where it is regarded as sacred. So in each neighborhood, they have this place where they put the cold bread, as we call it. the unconsumed bread, they put it, and then there was this informal market of people getting their bread and reselling it to the people who are from the farming industry. So actually, we were believing that we were building something new, but what we were really doing is imitating this ancient practice embedded in the Algerian culture.
I'm going to give you a little bit of my kind of potted history very quickly, and then I'll talk very specifically about sort of key aspects of implementing waste management in university settings. So my past is I've worked for the Environment Agency, which is the main regulatory body for England and Wales, and for 15 years, and then after that I've spent time at University of Southampton and University of Bournemouth in roles that have involved me in implementing comprehensive waste management systems. So the three things I'm going to really talk about here are that I think are fundamental building blocks for implementing sound waste management practices at an institution. The first is the strategic level, and it's really important to embed the environmental management within the strategy of the organisation. My experience has been if it's not aligned with the direction of the organisation, you can still make progress, but it just is really hard work. And we were successful at Bournemouth to get one of the 4 key outcomes of the institution to be sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, we also made quite a step change, and we talk about sustainability in terms of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm hoping you may well have heard about because they are really comprehensive and give you an opportunity to have a conversation with people about sustainability that frankly was really difficult before. And we can touch on that for the reasons why that in the chat. So that's the first element. Then you've got to translate that strategy into reality on the ground. And for that, we found that if you have a framework, it works so much better. And the framework we chose was the International Standard for Environmental Management Systems, and that's ISO 14001. And there are 3 elements of ISO 14001 which really play out, not only for waste management, but across the piece. So they are the 3 pillars. The first is prevention of pollution. The second is compliance with legislation and other elements. And the third is continual improvement. And they are absolutely essential to getting the building blocks right. The other element that we used was that we had a collaborative approach along the South Coast. So 7 universities and colleges all share the same recycling contract. And that brings with it great benefits because first of all, it meant the value of the contract, because we do go to a private provider for our waste management services. It gives you much greater leverage in terms of what you can get from the industry sector. But it also means that, of course, you can work out share best practice between yourselves. So I would recommend that for a really effective way to go about implementing waste management on campuses. And the third, of course, element is people. And that's people both in terms of the corporate level of the organisation, but also the individual. And the corporate level, which is the bit I worked out, is about putting in place the processes and the infrastructure, basically the bins, to make it as easy as possible for staff, students and visitors to our campus to recycle. And so that's our part of the bargain. And then, of course, we have to encourage those individuals to ensure they actually put the right thing in the right bin to make the system work. And there are various techniques that we've used to get us to a good point. But what I would say is it's really important to say that the approach to waste management has evolved over time. It's reflecting, if you like, what's been happening in the UK as a whole. So the move away from landfill has definitely benefited us, as has been the investment in recycling facilities. So they have both played their part in terms of being able to move us forward and get a better outcome for waste management. In terms of giving people sort of credits for recycling is an approach actually that we took at Bournemouth, and we used a system called Green Rewards. which is a software package, and it rewards people for positive behaviours. So that's both environmental and for their own health and well-being. And one of the default elements was about recycling. So if you recycle, and there are various elements for recycling, you got points. And sorry to be a bit corny here, but points mean prizes. And every month we gave we gave prizes to our staff, and we had to about 60% of our staff signed up to the scheme. So that was just one element, but we were also looking at ways to encourage people to not produce waste in the first place. So we had other elements we were going through, such as taxing the use of coffee cups. So we were introducing a taxation system to encourage people to reuse their own mugs, and we also introduced a similar kind of tax on water bottles. And I think Paolo's probably done something similar. A lot of universities in the UK have gone down a similar kind of approach, because the whole point is that if we can avoid producing the waste in the first place, that makes our life so much easier, and it also saves us money because it's not cheap to get rid of this stuff, particularly when you're talking about hazardous wastes and electronic wastes. Is expensive. And therefore, and we pay at Bournemouth, it's centrally budgeted. So the individual doesn't pay to get rid of their waste. The centre picks up the tab. So in terms of an incentive, it becomes quite difficult to get people, unless you, as I say, tax them, if you like, at the product stage. And that's really where, when I was talking about evolution, is that really what we need to focus on is not so much the 3 R's or whether it's useful, it's the rethink bit at the front end. So that's rethinking about what products we actually have on offer, and also how we encourage people to go down that route about changing their habits. And we've done a lot of work around that, particularly around nudges, as they are known, to encourage people to do that, go down that route.
I'm perhaps going to add a little bit to what Neil said. So the first I will start off by saying is that, you know, many of the things we do in the UK are only possible because of the way waste is regulated in the UK, and that things might be a little bit different where you are. However, there's a number of principles that apply regardless of where you are. So the first that we've followed is that we try and reduce the environmental impact and health impacts associated with treating our waste. And the second is, once that is in place, we then begin working on a transition to the principles of the circular economy. So at GCU, we have about 5,000 tons of waste a year. That's about 100 rubbish bin trucks. 80% of it is from a campus in the centre of Glasgow, and I suppose the rest is from some student residencies. We have 660 room and a small satellite campus in London. We manage our waste according to the principles of the waste hierarchy. And many of the tools we've adopted and the interventions we've made, they're not novel in their own right, but many years on, they are beginning to show a cumulative effect. So we do things like, to reduce the environmental impact and financial costs of our waste, we have worked quite hard to develop an understanding of what is in our waste. And this is from broad quantities that our waste contractor provides us, but our own waste analysis. So we sit and we sift through our waste once a year to understand what is being recycled and what, more importantly, what isn't being recycled. We continuously invite feedback from our community, from students and staff and visitors, in what we could do better. We train staff formally and informally, and we draw on this also with our environmental management system, ISO 14001. We choose waste contractors, or we're now in a position where we can work with waste contractors that keep most of the waste within the UK. A lot of it gets sent for processing and separating and sorting in countries that perhaps have less strong controls as the UK, but we managed to keep the sort of the nastier parts in the UK, and we focusing on reducing waste streams as well. So we do process reviews. So we with the digitalization of our operations, students need to print less assignments because they're submitted online, and our governance team that manage the university leadership's work, they've gone to an online system, so they don't print thousands and thousands of sheets of paper. We're removing printers, for example, and we're in the process of removing 700 printers from 1,400 staff to about 100, not without its contention. Some people are not happy about it. We look at how we manage stock. So our chemists, they've moved from large quantities or large containers for chemicals in their labs to very small containers. And they can do that because there are supply chains that can deliver these things quickly. But the positive side is, if they drop a container, they don't lose all of it. They just lose a little bit. And the containers are made of plastic, so the chances of breaking are reduced. We look at prolonging equipment reuse. Ideally, our own equipment with us, but also making equipment we don't need available to others for reuse. And we look at substituting materials. So we look at what in our operations is a waste and what could we remove. So when we had a new catering contractor, we replaced 27,000 bottles of milk, plastic bottles of milk, with these pouches of the milk. And although the plastic that contains the milk cannot be recycled, the cardboard around it can, and it frees up a lot of space in our waste containers, so we can maybe get more out of them. And we also have financial incentives. So from charges for single-use items like coffee cups to penalizing our waste contractor or anyone that puts the wrong type of waste in the wrong container. And this was mainly used as a leverage for our caterer that would put large quantities of food waste in the recycling bin. So we did training, but then when that didn't work as well as it could, we started charging them. I think in terms of next stages, we're trying to look at supply chain. So the things that are brought in, and an example that I'm focusing on at the moment, or trying to focus on, is we buy stationery, pens, paper, etc., and they come twice a week in a box, and we have to recycle the box. And I'm trying to get our stationery provider to send that material in a paper bag, which is much lighter than the box. And cheaper for us to recycle. But at the moment, we're having some legacy investment issues because they've spent a lot of money in an automated packing facility that puts everything in a box, and they don't want to get rid of the box. So where have all these measures taken us? So we're at about 5,000 tons. That's a 30% reduction since about 2014-15. We recycle 70% of our waste. About 40% of that is upfront, so it's what we do, and the remainder is our contractor. And we send no waste to landfill. So that's just by following simple steps that Neil started alluding to, we've had a reasonable impact. If we collaborate with others, it becomes even more powerful. In Glasgow, most of our universities or higher and further education institutions, so universities and colleges, we share the same waste contractor. We don't share the same waste contract, but with a little bit of planning, we probably could. And you can hold a lot of leverage that way, as Neil was saying, in terms of the services they provide. So, for example, although we sell some types of pallets that end up on campus, we don't sell all of them, so the others end up going for recycling. Now, if the 7 of us in Glasgow could work together, the waste contractor could probably dedicate a vehicle to collecting pallets or other materials, and well, other procurement contracts as well.
But that is it. We are done and dust carted for today. Thanks again to everyone for the sustained quality of the conversation, participation, organisation, and I hope inspiration. Next time round, we move on to the city and focus on our increasingly urban lives and how universities can help ensure that just because we're in built up areas, we don't build up emissions and waste. À la prochaine, au revoir, and thank you for today. Bye.